So Dan, what makes you tick?
Watching these people grow and prosper in their careers over time, music to my ears. Absolutely love it. You'd be surprised at how many tech-oriented founders are passionate about building a solution to a problem. Here are your tools. Get at it. Have fun.
At this stage of your career, how do you define success?
Outside of the quantitatives, success is, did I love doing this, and did I meet great people, and did I leave my mark in a good way on people where I helped them? Because it goes back to question number one, which is what makes you tick.
Dan, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the invitation.
I think this is going to be a very good episode, so I'm excited to get straight in. So Dan, what makes you tick?
So I'm a big educator. I've kicked and scratched my whole career to learn what to do, what not to do. And when I look back at all I've learned, it feels really good to share that with others who are earlier in their journey. And so anything that I've learned that I can share with people that are trying to start a company, sell a product, be a leader, all that, it's a pay it forward for me. I love doing that. And I do that on a personal level and a professional level. It's very motivating to help others and give back. And that's what makes me tick, doing that. And then, of course, watching these people prosper as a result of the knowledge and the experience that I'm sharing with them is certainly wonderful. I also enjoy solving problems and coming up with creative solutions to solving problems, things that you haven't really thought about. I also am very operationally minded, so I like to improve an operation when I see one. I'm the guy that'll go to a stadium to watch a game, and I'll notice that they're not selling enough beer fast enough because they didn't prepare ahead of time for in-between periods or at halftime or whatever the game is, right? And I'll think and I'll look at their situation and I'll say, geez, if I was in here, I could do such a better job of selling more beer and making more money for the company. So I'm always thinking about that sort of stuff, and it really motivates me and it keeps me rolling. It's what makes me tick.
Where do you think that comes from, that mix of who you are?
That's a great question. So I grew up kind of a self-starter, not a lot of should I say, parental guidance, and just kind of had to figure out life on my own. So it was always about how can I get better, do better, improve things, solve problems so I could survive, solve issues so that I could advance my career, make more money, become successful financially as well as, emotionally and spiritually and all that. So, yeah, I'd say that it's a survival thing.
I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned about, loving seeing the people that you've given advice or that you've helped succeed. What's one of your favorite success stories?
My kids, actually. That's an easy answer. So my older son, who is a successful entrepreneur, he's chip off the old block, as they say. He's just like me. I didn't make life easy for him purposely. I wanted him to figure it out. We're both skiers, and he's got a tattoo on his body that's a double black diamond. And when I said to him, well, what'd you do that for? He said, because there's no challenge, Dad, that I can't figure out how to solve. He said, bring it on. And life is a series of challenges. And when you put something in front of me that's difficult, it not only motivates me, but I love the outcome. I love the feeling of a good outcome. And that's pretty motivating as a dad, to have a kid who has followed some of your advice and gone down some of your footsteps, whatever the saying is, and has crushed it. And he is crushing it. He's doing great. So that's a big one. I have success stories in business where I'll tell you what. Here's one. It's kind of a macro, but I've got a pretty large network of go-to-market professionals, very, very senior, very, very smart in their craft. So we're talking about sales, marketing, customer success, and partnerships. They regularly call me to say, Dan, whenever you go to your next gig as a CRO, please take me with you, because I love working under your leadership in your environments, and I love how you treat your people. And we always win. And I like to be a winner among winners. That's pretty cool. When I see that, that says a lot about the leadership that I've delivered over my career. So that's another example. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think, especially when you've been successful yourself, I think one of the concerns people have is like, how do I make sure that my kids are still successful? Because I think sometimes some of that struggle is what people needed to become successful. So I wanted to dig in a little bit about what you said about you never made life easy for your son. What did that look like practically for you?
So look, life throws you curveballs every freaking day, and they come up unexpected. Some of them are big ones, some of them are not so big. And I think the goal of a parent, at least my definition or interpretation of a goal for a parent, is how do you teach your kids to be really good at getting through life and be happy, whatever that means to them. And it's not necessarily about money, although money makes things easier, but it doesn't solve problems. We all know that. There's all kinds of sayings around that. Um, and so today, I find that a lot of parents are quick to just hand their child something to solve their problem instantly. When a baby is crying, when the kids are little and you're on a road trip and they're in the back seat and they're getting frustrated because they are asked to sit still for more than 5 minutes, and a parent hands them a phone or an iPad and says, "Here, play with this." I think you're doing your kid a disservice because you're not teaching the kid how to be creative and thoughtful and entertain themselves, self-fulfilling. And with my kids, I push hard to make sure that I don't quickly hand them the solution. They know that I'm there for them to support them, but I help them think and I help them figure out on their own how they can creatively, innovatively, in some cases, because technology is a big part of our life these days. How can they solve stuff, whether it's an issue with a relationship at school, or maybe it's a difficult teacher, or maybe it's, it could be a goal that they've set for themselves. It could be a health problem. This is how you get through, and this is how you deal with it. And in doing so, over the course of their growth, you win when they look you in the eye as an adult and say, "I'm happy and I'm self sufficient. I'm financially responsible and independent. I've got lots of friends. I'm grounded. And sure, I have problems like anyone else, and I have anxiety like anyone else over certain things, but I'm pretty good, Dad." And that's the goal. And I have two older children who are exactly that, and I'm super proud of them. So to me, that kind of a formula works well. And I will share that with any parent who says, how did you do this? And look, I'm no master. I make mistakes every day, and I fuck shit up all. I mess stuff up all the time with my kids, but I own it. I own those. I own those mistakes, and they also see that I'm normal and a human, and
Yeah.
that humans make mistakes sometimes.
Yeah. And going back to your leadership, what would you say are the kind of the core components of the environment that you're creating as a leader?
So the core components of leadership are, first of all, I lead from a macro level, not a micro level, and I teach people how to be accountable, and I teach them ownership. So I think the best way to lead from my perspective is to let them do their jobs, make sure those jobs are clearly defined, make sure that there are very clear swim lanes between person A's job and person B's job and person C's job, even though you're all on the same team. You each have a swim lane and you know where your swim lane ends and the next person's begins. And then let them do their job, let them be accountable, make sure they're well trained and they have the resources that they need to be able to do it properly, and then let them go and help them measure themselves. The old school way that I've been involved with in my earlier part of my career was, you had a leaderboard and you put sales reps up on a leaderboard. Yeah. And I found that to be very demotivating.
Interesting.
Many times I was not the leader.
Okay.
And I felt like I was a loser. Even though I was doing really well, I wasn't number one. Maybe I was number two or number three. And then I often found myself the leader. And the other people kind of look at you like, "Oh, we don't like him. He's always winning all the contests. He's always top of the leaderboard." And after a while, they want to be number one, but they give you a hard time. And they talk behind your back about it. So I think that kind of approach is old school and it's shitty and it doesn't work for me. Instead, I'll have a leaderboard, but that leaderboard is everybody against themselves, maybe at this time last quarter or maybe year over year. So anybody that wants to be number one can be number one. We can all be number one against ourselves. This is the best quarter or the best year you've ever had. Congratulations. You get a bonus. You get a prize. You get notoriety and recognition and a pat on the back and a hug. And that has worked much better for me than the other leaderboard example that I gave you. I also treat people with respect and I listen. I think leadership is critical. Listening is a critical part of leadership. So if I ask a question, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. And it's not just what they say, it's what they mean. Because some people struggle a little bit with the two, where, they'll tell you or say something, but you have to dig in to find out, well, what do you mean by that? I also do a lot of why.
Okay.
Why do you feel that way? Why are you questioning that? Why do you think this is a better idea? And it forces them to think, which is the last part of my answer at this point. There's a lot more to leadership for me than that, but I go on all day, right? Why do you feel the way you do? Why is that your answer? I want people to say, whenever I'm with Dan Hurwitz, I think. He's always making me think. And guess what? Payroll is typically the number one line item on our OpEx. I pay these people to think. That's why I hired you, because I think you're a great thinker and I want you to do it here. So I'm all about that. So those are some examples of how I like to approach leadership. And there's a lot more, like I said, but
Would you mind delving a bit deeper into the micro versus the macro, just for anyone that might not know what you mean by that?
Sure, micro versus macro. So you can look at it from an economic standpoint. There's macroeconomics, which are the big trends that are going on, and then there's the microeconomics, which are the little details around those trends. So macro management or macro leadership is giving people, here's the job that I need you to do. Here's what a successful outcome looks like. Here are your tools. Get at it. Have fun. And if you, I will check in with you every now and then to see how you're doing, to make sure you're on course, but I expect you to do your job, the reason I hired you, and think. Micro is the leader that stands over them and says, did you do this? Did you do that? Very task oriented, in their grill, as we say, all the time, to the point where they're like, can you just give me a little room and get out of my face and let me do the job? Micromanagers are frowned upon. Most micromanagers will never, ever say, I'm a micromanager, because it's negative. But many of them are and just don't know how to admit it. It's funny because the reverse is macro managers typically think, yeah, sometimes I'm in the shorts of my people a little too much. And the reality is they're not at all. So micro think they're macro and macro think they're micro. And at the end, nobody wants you to be in their face. Now, there are two times when micro is important. Number one is when you're new, and you need a lot of hand holding to figure out, how do I play this game? How do I sell this product? How do I do my marketing or customer service job? And then the other time is when the engine light goes on and you need to do a thorough investigation or understanding of what's going on here and why isn't this person able to achieve their goals. And so you got to get in there and start looking at the details. And that's a micro effort. And I'll tell the person, the only time that I'm going to get in your shorts is right now when you're new and I'm helping you, and then when the engine light goes on. So please understand that. And I do have that conversation with every person who's a direct report with me at everywhere I go.
And how did you learn to lead?
How did I learn to lead? So it's kind of a plethora of lots of different components or ingredients. So I'll start with good bosses. I learned from great leaders.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, every time I'm with this boss, this person, I learn a ton and I feel good about myself. So what are they doing that helps me feel that way? And I became a sponge of that person. And then I looked at the opposite, which is, who are the bosses? And I've had many who are just awful. They suck. And every time I walked away, I felt like small and beat up and just not good. So what are they doing? And there's a lot to be learned from those people. And I would walk away from those conversations and I would say to myself, don't ever be like that guy or that woman. Yeah. Because if I feel like shit being around them, so does everybody else. But nobody wants to say that out loud unless you get a couple beers in them after work one day and the boss isn't there, right? But still, that's an ugly thing to do and it's not cool. So that's one piece. Another one is I've been to a ton of conferences, events, and seminars, and all about leadership, and I'm self-taught.
Okay.
So I want to sponge and learn and listen, and I'm curious, and I want to know how can I be a better leader. And then, of course, I read a lot of leadership stuff. In fact, I just got a really good series of articles from Harvard Business Review all about leadership. And I'm just beginning to dive into each one of them and really learn and listen. And you know what? If I'm in the car on a long trip, I'll listen to a podcast for an hour or two or three on leadership because I want to perfect it. And you can always get better.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at it, but I'm sure I know there's people that are phenomenal at it, and I want to learn from them. And then once I learn from them, I want to teach it to my people so they can go on and be great leaders.
What were some of the things that you had to learn or that you struggled with when you first started leading people? So
the first one is, I mentioned earlier that I grew up with a little bit of a survival mentality. You got to, kill your own food to eat type of thing. Not literally. I had food on the table by my family, but you get the idea. So I got really confident in my ability to take care of my own stuff, accepting that other people also have good ideas and good approaches to things became difficult for me because I would come in initially, and I remember when I was in college and I would get into, group work, and I'd immediately want to take over as the group leader because I want to do it my way because I know I'm confident. I'm going to make sure that we all get the best grade. And the way to do that is to just freaking own the room. And I would try to do that. And I found that I was banging my head against the wall whenever I came up against other people who were smarter than me. What I realized is they've got some really good ideas. A good leader listens to those ideas and makes sure that these people feel like they can get a word in and actually participate and feel like $1 million. So if I can do that, then that's going to help me. So that's one thing I learned. I also learned the saying, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
You should listen twice as much as you speak. Now you're asking me questions, so I'm just talk the whole time on this podcast show. If this were a conversation with other people, I'd probably start off by doing a whole lot of listening.
Yes.
And when I come into a new company, or a new company for me as CRO, they'll always say to me, what's your 30, 60, 90-day plan, Dan? And the answer is the first 30 is always listening. I just want to listen and understand and ask a ton of questions and really absorb and hear what people have to say. And then, of course, ask the why. So listening was something that I didn't do very well earlier. I think I do a better job now, but certainly I could improve. Another thing that I learned that was tough for me was to be more patient and accept that not everybody moves as fast as me. Not everybody thinks the way I do. And it doesn't mean that my way is the right way and theirs isn't. You can think differently and be smarter. It was important to me to realize that sometimes you have to lead based on the lowest common denominator, which might be the least fast, the least intelligent, the least experienced person in the room so that everybody feels included. And so what I started doing, and I took this page out of leadership from Bezos, Jeff is amazing on so many levels, and that is he always begins the meeting saying nothing. And what he encourages is for the least experienced people in the room, in the meeting, to start off giving their thoughts about the topic at hand. And that way, everybody hears what that person said right out of the gate. Because if you start with the most senior person leading the meeting and doing all the talking, that junior person isn't going to say anything because everything that he or she would have said has already been said, and it doesn't give them the feeling like they even participated in the meeting at all. And I love that. And so I do that. I want to hear what, and you don't want to call them out. Hey, Steve, you're the most junior.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what you think? Instead, it'll be like, hey, Steve, what do you think about this? It's not necessarily a formula that everybody knows. You just kind of subtly do it and make it work right. And it's inclusive. And I think that's great. So those are a few things that I've learned and I had trouble with at the beginning, but I'm a lot better at it now.
That's amazing. I really like that last one, especially. So I'm probably going to steal that one.
Take it. Like I said, I'm happy to teach people what I've learned along the way, and you can do what you want with it.
Yeah.
And if it
Yeah.
works for you, shoot me a note down the road that say, "Hey, Dan, this was great," and that
Right.
makes me
Great.
feel good.
Right.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
me feel.
Absolutely. What is the problem that you solve?
So for the last 20 or so years, I've been the guy that comes into series or growth stage. So typically Series A, Series B, tech startups, mostly SaaS. And I come in and build or rebuild companies that need me to quote unquote help them get to the next level. And they always say, we need a guy like you to take us to the next level from a go to market standpoint, because I'm a CRO, I'm a go to market guy, right? But what they really mean and don't want to say it because it doesn't sound very good, although it's honest, is, hey, our company is a complete mess right now. We've overspent. We spent too quickly out of the gate when we got our Series A. We're moving recklessly. We're not selling enough. We're not meeting our various KPIs, and our people are frustrated, and our board's frustrated, and our pipeline's weak. Customers are now being affected by it, and the vibe here sucks. Can you fix it? And that's what I do. I fix companies. In fact, I have a podcast that I started. When the producer of the podcast was helping me pick a name for it, he said, "What do you do?" And I said, I gave him this answer that you just asked me, and then I answered. And then he said, "What do you really do?" I said, "You know what I really do? I help companies unfuck themselves because they get themselves so fucked up in the first place that they don't know what to do. And then they call me to come in and unravel it." So my podcast show is called How to Unfuck Your Startup.
Love that.
And it's quite successful, actually. And it's really fun. And the name itself is a little bit provocative, so it gets a lot of attention. And it also allows people to let go a little bit and just be themselves, which makes for a much better conversation, as you know, because you're doing it right now really well.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So on your podcast, what is it that you talk about with your guests on the podcast?
So I want to know. First of all, the guests comprise of founders, investors, salespeople. I've had a few recruiters. I had a recruiter that focuses on private equity. I've had a recruiter that focuses on venture, and compared the two of them and asked, the second one, I asked questions based on what the first one asked or said. And it was pretty interesting.
That's cool.
But mostly founders, recruiters, and investors. But anybody else who's in the ecosystem, I am looking right now to secure an episode with a friend of mine who's a lawyer who deals with the startup space. So he helps companies figure out, IP and how to work in other countries and do contracts and all that sort of thing. So I'm interested in what are startups doing right now that are a problem, and how can we have a conversation around the problem and then come up with some actionable advice that can be turned into little video snippets and pushed out there so others can benefit from a conversation between two experienced folks. And so, for example, if you were a founder, I'd be asking you, what's fucked up about your company right now, or in the past, or the last one that you did and the one that you failed at. Let's get in. Let's talk about that. Why'd you fail? What happened there? What would you do differently today? What's some advice that you could give someone, a founder who is just getting started and might be dealing with the same kind of pain? And those are the types of things that we talk about. And there's a lot of them. And I could list 8 specific things that founders do that when I come in to quote unquote, I'll just say unravel at this point. There's 8 things that I typically see at almost every company. And I'm happy to share those if you want.
That was actually going to be my next question: is what are the common things that you're seeing when you're going into companies? So that's perfect.
Yep. So whenever anybody asks me that, I say there are 8. And so the 8 are, now remember, we're talking about early-ish stage companies that could be anywhere from seed to B, sometimes even C. My older daughter is a HR professional and has had a career in the tech startup space for companies that are C, D, and E. And so they're very far along, doing 100, 150, 200 million, 500, 1,000 employees. And when I talk to her about some of the things that are going on at not her current, but in her past companies, it's amazing that I'm like, they're doing what? Why would they do that? And companies of all stages have dysfunction. I've worked at big companies like AOL and NBC and in my past, and there was dysfunction there as well. But anyway, the first one, number one, is the value prop. your value prop, what it is that you sell, is not validated. You haven't gone out to your market to confirm that they really want it and they are willing to pay for it. Now, this is an early stage problem, but you'd be surprised at how many tech-oriented founders are passionate about building a solution to a problem. So they go and do that, and they basically built a hammer. Now they're out in the marketplace looking for a nail. And you don't want to be a hammer looking for a nail. You got to go to the marketplace and find out, are there enough people out there that are experiencing this problem that if I solved it, would be willing to pay me money to solve it? And when you go through that validation process, guess what? You're building a pipeline, because you can put every one of those people that said, yeah, I would absolutely want this. You're putting them on your wait list, so to speak. Hey, when this thing gets built, I'm going to call you up and I'm going to sell it to you. But guess what? You're going to get it at a major discount because you were somebody that helped me confirm that this is a validated offering. So the value prop isn't validated. That's number one. Number two, complication. Shit. Everybody, especially tech founders, not everybody's an engineer. And people that are trying to solve problems don't necessarily want to look under the hood. In fact, if you tried to sell a car today to somebody who's not technically inclined, and you started with opening the hood and showing them, here's the turbo system, and here's the coolant, and here's where you change the oil and all that, you're not selling. No, too complicated. So the story and the product oftentimes is far more complicated than it needs to be, and you need to simplify. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was selling advertising early in my career, I worked for a boss who, by the way, falls into the, here's what I learned, what not to do.
Not to do, yeah.
And one day he called me into his office and he said to me, hey, Dan, your communication skills are terrible. So I'm going to pay to have you go to night school and take some classes so you can learn how to communicate better, both verbal and written. He said, I'll give you the budget to do it. You go find the place, you figure it out. And I was living in New York City, and I didn't have a pot to piss in. I was poor, but I was happy that this boss allowed me to do that. And that's not what made him a bad boss. There's a whole lot of other stuff that I could share that fits in that conversation, but that's a different conversation. So anyway, I went to NYU, and I remember night school, I took this class, and the professor on the first night said, there are two types of communicators out there. Those that take simple concepts and overcomplicate them, and those that take complicated concepts and simplify them. I'm going to teach you how to do the latter. And I thought, love this. So because I'm in tech, I really spend a lot of time trying to simplify what these often very complex zeros and ones technology offerings do, and put it into a way that's almost personalized, where you can tell a story and people go, yeah, and they lean in and they feel good about what you're doing. And it's solutions oriented. It's problem solution oriented. So I focus a lot on the story. And as an advisor, I help companies create their stories so that they're more powerful in the marketplace and people can understand them. Because at the end of the day, if you overcomplicate something and the person that you're telling it to doesn't understand, very rarely will they raise their hand and say, I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying. People aren't going to do that. So they just go, yeah. Hey, why don't we have lunch someday? See ya, and you're out.
Yeah.
And you'll never hear from them again. Number three, ironically, lack of strong leadership with a clear vision and a plan to get there, which I call the North Star. So when I'm in the interview process and I'm looking at these startups that need me to help them fix their situation, one of my first questions is, what's your North Star, which I'll often define, and that's the sometime period from now, whether it's 20 years, 3 years, 6 months. What do you want to be? What do you want to look like? Paint a picture for me of what that ultimate vision is. And it could be financially oriented, product oriented. It could be notoriety. It could be one company that I was talking to recently is very big in philanthropy, and their vision, their North Star is they want to help an entire community of humans be better because that community is struggling right now. And their whole MO is, we built this platform, this company, this tech company, so that we could ultimately give back to this particular community of people. And I think that is phenomenal. Great. There's your North Star. How do we get there? So that vision and plan, that North Star, I use my own kind of custom version of OKRs to help companies figure it out and get there. And I believe that every employee in the company needs to get behind that North Star and understand it. And then back to the swim lanes, they need to really know, what's my role, my swim lane? How do I fit next to the people that are in the swim lanes next to me? What am I accountable to do? And own it, and then go get it done and celebrate on a regular basis and communicate with other folks in the company how we're all doing, because we're all one big team trying to reach that star together. So that's number 3. Number 4, communication. It's not clear, it's not consistent, and it sometimes is not transparent. A lot of times I'll go in, for example, to the engineering department and poke my head around a little bit, and I'll have the CTO introduce me to their team. Oftentimes these engineers are just heads down, writing code all day, and they have no idea how my go-to-market operation is actually presenting what they're building to the outside world. They have no idea. And when you sit down and just explain it to them, they're like, wow, you've never seen so many mouths drop in your life. Like, oh, this is amazing. And it's great. Everybody needs to know transparently what's going on with the business of the company, the finances of the company for the most part. And I think that's important. That's number 4. Number 5, and I'll move a little quicker here. You got the wrong people on the bus.
Okay.
And you might have some of the right people, but they're in the wrong seats. People, I said it before, it's your number 1 line item on your OpEx, arguably. You got to have great people, and you got to train them and invest in them, and you got to make sure they know what they're supposed to do, and then back to the whole swim lane accountability, whatever. But if you don't have the right people, then you're going to fail. Lack of clarity on the job responsibilities in the swim lanes. We've talked about that. That's a big issue, where you said if you said to each of your employees, write me your job description, you'd be blown away at how many people don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. How can you go to work every day and not be clear on that and just kind of do your thing and try to stay under the radar so no one asks you? That's really hard, and that exists a lot. Number 7 is ownership and accountability, and that's a big one. There shouldn't be any finger pointed. There shouldn't be any finger pointing. There shouldn't be any this team, that team. And I see that a lot with kind of legacy sales and marketing departments, because typically as CRO, both report to me. And when sales and marketing are working together as one with the same ultimate goals, again, back to the North Star, the go-to-market organization has their own giant swim lane, if you will, that's going to help the company get to the North Star. But guess what? So does product, so does dev, so does HR, so does finance. Everybody's got their lane to get there. I think sales and marketing need to be together. And there isn't a whole bunch of finger pointing. Oh, marketing didn't give me any good leads. Really, fuck that. Go out and work with marketing to, make a difference. And let's talk about how we can do that together and everybody's involved. And then the last one is what I'll refer to as an operational shit show, where the operations of the company, oftentimes in these early stage companies, they don't have a COO because the CEO thinks that they can do it all. And so they say, oh yeah, I'm the COO. And I'm also the head cook and bottle washer, and I do everything here, and I'm a control freak, and that's why the company's failing, right? But operationally speaking, a good operationally minded leadership team makes sure that there are processes, there are guidelines, there's training, there's clarity, there's communication. They have the right technology and systems to make everything work. And that is a very, very important role that is often neglected. And then they wonder, why doesn't this place deliver on its numbers? It's because it's a shit show. That's why. Let's clean it up. Let's fix it. And so as a CRO, you go into a board meeting and the board will say, okay, did you make the number? Did you not? It's as simple as that, black and white. And when the answer is no, we didn't make the number, they may ask why, but what you can't do as a CRO is stand up and say, well, the CEO is acting as the COO, doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And the product team has a product that no one really understands what it can and can't do. And the CTO creates software that's full of bugs and regressions. And you're expecting me to go sell this stuff and keep customers happy? I'm never going to stand up and say that. I just own it. And I just say we didn't make the number. And what I'm hoping for in a good culture is at that moment for the CTO and the chief product officer, if that's two different people, to both or one person stand up and say, this isn't Dan. Dan is doing the best he can selling a product that is not ideal and it's broken. And that's why we need some help and we need some time. But I find that, and I've seen that over and over again, that game. So you just kind of got to own it. And sometimes you take one for the team and you take a black eye. And guess what? I've been fired for that kind of a situation before. And it's not fun, but it happens a lot.
Would you mind recapping those 8?
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly why my thumbs up. Number 1 is the value prop is not validated. Number 2 is your story and your product is too complicated. Number 3, lack of strong leadership with a clear vision and a plan to get there. I refer to that as the North Star. Number 4, communication across the company isn't clear and isn't consistent. You could almost say that 4 and 3 are very similar, but they're not. Number 5, you got the wrong people on the bus. You got good people, but maybe they're in the wrong seats. And then you might have some not so good people that need to be exited the bus. Number 6 is clarity on job responsibilities and swim lanes. Number 7 is ownership and accountability. And number 8 is an operational shit show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's a lot, right? My mouth is dry from all of that. Should have a glass of water.
Just as we start to round up, I wanted to hear about 2 things. One of them is your best turnaround, and the other one is your toughest turnaround.
So my toughest turnaround was a failure. And I'm not going to name companies, and anybody could go and look at my LinkedIn and see that, he's talking about this company, because I don't want to label them a failure. When I came in there, what was presented to me as the state of the state. So here's our numbers, here's how big our pipeline is, here's our processes, here's what our sales and marketing and customer success teams look like. And I was sold a very grandiose and better explanation of all of that than was true. So you could say I was sold a bill of goods, but didn't know it until I got in. And you don't know until you get in, right? Because I'm not going to meet every single sales rep individually before the interview process, especially if I'm coming in to take over somebody who's currently their boss and no one knows it yet, right? I can't go in and call every customer. You can call a few if it's appropriate, but I can't call every customer to see if their deal is real. So what was a pipeline of X, after 4 months of cleansing that pipeline or cleaning it, I found that it was really Y, which was 1/4 of what it actually was.
Wow.
And my compensation was tied to that. I'm not an engineer. I'm I'd like to think great, go-to-market person. And I can help you with your sales, your marketing, your customer success, your partnerships. I can tell a great story, all that. But what I can't do is open the hood and start looking at the flux capacitor to see whether or not the code is written properly and whether or not the infrastructure is stable if I bring in a gazillion-dollar client that's going to really push the envelope on our scale. And in this case, what I learned after the fact was that the product was not ready. And if I were to bring in a large client, we would struggle delivering it, and it was a house of cards about ready to fall down. And what I learned about 6 months in was that we were starting to have churn that we couldn't solve from a sales standpoint because the product was creating a problem. The product was failing. There were regressions, countless bugs. Customers were screaming and yelling, and a lot of what they were promised, written into contracts and deals that were sold before I got there, still hadn't been delivered.
Wow.
And so I kind of inherited a big giant bag of shit and didn't know it because there's only so much you can do in your due diligence process to take on a go-to-market role like this. So I did the best I could with it. And after a certain amount of time, I got fired. And I got fired because of the exact same story that I just shared before, where I wasn't about to get up in front of the board and say, it's all their fault, because that's just weak. I would never do that. And the people who were very much responsible for some of these issues, not all of them, but a lot of them, didn't necessarily stand up and own them. So I got let go. And I look at that as that was a failure. And that was not a fun time. And after that, a lot of people within the organization got let go. And so it was kind of ugly. My best was not a turnaround, actually. It was a build from scratch. And I've done 2 of those. And this was way early in my career. And I'll make this one real fast. We had a tech that was technically SaaS, but not called SaaS because back then it was, hey, we got this really cool technology. How about if we sell it to you and charge you a monthly fee for it or an annual fee for it? And then next year we're going to charge you a fee again. Oh, you mean like a subscription? Sure, a subscription. So that's what we're going to sell you. And we did. And we sold some big ones to companies like Procter & Gamble and GlaxoSmithKline and others. And within 3.5 years, and I'm not going to say I, because that would be pompous, but we built a go-to-market organization for this company that did 75 million bucks in revenue, from 0 to 75 million in 3.5 years. It was awesome. And what makes it a success for me is the people. This was the best darn team that I have ever built and worked alongside in my entire career. A handful of them came with me from companies prior, like AOL and NBC, and they came in here because they wanted to work with Dan. And I was psyched to have them work with me again. So brought them in, and then we brought some new ones in, quite a few new ones. We had a killer team, and we had so much fun going to work every day. It was before people were remote. So we were in the office every day. I was in New York City, and we crushed it. And it was really awesome. And the name of that company was Audience Science. And they were the premier and master of a technology back in the day called behavioral targeting. And behavioral targeting is basically, sharing data or collecting data on cookies and then going out and finding those people. So that was a fantastic success. And it wasn't the one that made me the most money. It was the one that was just most rewarding because of the people. And those people still to this day, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, so-and-so, I got a great opportunity that I'm going to go and be CRO at this company, and I want you to come with me. And the only thing that would get in the way of that is timing. When they say, yeah, I just took a job recently and I have responsibility to stick around here for a while. But other than that, they're like, sure, let's do it, because that was fun. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing both of those with us. So we have a closing tradition, which is called tick fire questions. So it's kind of like a quick fire question round. Are you ready for that?
Guess I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
So first question is, what are the top 3 things that you look for when you're hiring someone?
I have 5, and I'll rattle through them. And here's what: number 1 is IQ. Are you smart? Number 2, EQ. Do you have a clue as to how you're coming across in this world? Number 3 is, and these are salespeople. Number 3 is communication. You have really good communication skills, both verbal and written. Those are my top 3. Number 4, number 5. Number 4 is, can you sell? Because if you can't, you're probably not right for this role. And number 5 is, would I want to go camping with you for the weekend?
Oh.
And be, number 1, what do you bring to the table? Yeah. Number 2, would I be ready to blow my head off if at the end of the weekend I just had enough of you and I just can't stand you anymore? Because customers like people, they like to buy from people who they like.
Yeah.
And if I find that you're annoying and at the end of the weekend I just want to shoot myself in the head because I've been with you all weekend, then I probably don't want to hire you. Those are my 5.
That's great. I love number 5. I love number 5. At this stage of your career, how do you define success?
Well, because I'm a CRO, success is measured in outcomes.
Okay.
So it's all about outcomes. People hire me to produce an outcome. And if that North Star outcome is, we want to exit in 2 years, 3 years, we want to be worth X amount of money, we want to hit a top line revenue of Y, we want to be profitable, whatever it may be, that's all very measurable. So that's success. Outside of the quantitatives, success is, did I love doing this, and did I meet great people, and did I leave my mark in a good way on people where I helped them? Because it goes back to question number 1, which is what makes you tick. To me, a great outcome, a great success is people did really well around me, next to me, and learned. And then watching these people grow and prosper in their careers over time, music to my ears. Absolutely love it.
If you could have any guest on your podcast, who would it be?
I don't know. Might be you. Probably, we got this political thing going on right now. I'd probably pick one on each side of the political spectrum.
Okay.
And having been watching here in the U.S., the Democratic National Convention and all the speakers, I thought Barack Obama gave an unbelievable speech. I think he'd be pretty cool to have on as a guest. But then at the same time, I'd want to go on the other side and grab a Republican, maybe somebody who decided that he wants to be a Republican, like Elon Musk, and partner with Donald Trump. It would be pretty cool to have a guy like that on and get some perspective. But there's, a whole list of, wow, wouldn't it be great to have that person on? Like, I'd want to have Abe Lincoln on as a guest if I could. Yeah, he was remarkable, right? So
amazing. And last question, one more question. Sales leaders who are going to succeed in the next 5 years will be great at what?
Rapid fire answer. Recognizing that sales is still a contact sport and always will be. As much as AI is going to automate a whole lot of jobs, humans are still making decisions on big ticket items big ticket purchase items. And I think it's very important to press the flesh, as they say. Uh, get in front of your customer, take them out for a cup of coffee, a cocktail, a dinner, go play golf, get to know them as people, humans. And if you are good at that and you can find a way to do that in a remote work environment, then you're going to be successful. That's just one, but there are others. And look, it's going to become a very AI generated world, or it's going to be a heavy AI world. It already is. I'm using it like crazy. I love it. I think it's the greatest stuff.
Amazing. That was a great answer. Dan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I did too.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope you found my answers helpful.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of coming from the heart here, so it is what it is.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.